Our scripture reading today is from Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12.
In the time of King Herod,
after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet."
"And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea,
are by no means least among the rulers of Judea. Far from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there, ahead of them, went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
Happy 11th day of Christmas. The 12th day of Christmas is Epiphany, which is actually January 6th, but we celebrate Epiphany Sunday today because how many of you would come back to church tomorrow, right? Although, as we mentioned in the children's message, Epiphany is a big deal in a lot of countries, particularly Spanish-speaking countries. And so we are mindful of that celebration, and we come to honor that Epiphany ourselves. We know this holiday best as the time we get to sing We Three Kings and hear We Three Kings. You know, the scripture doesn't say how many kings there were. It only says there were 3 gifts. We've just made that assumption, but I don't want to ruin anybody's epiphany by breaking any myths. If it's important there were 3 for you, there were 3, okay? Epiphany is one of my favorite holidays. Often lost in post-Christmas, Epiphany actually holds a great deal of spiritual meaning. Epiphany means manifestation and has come to represent the manifestation of Jesus, the love of God to the world, symbolized in the wise ones coming to visit. Epiphany also means that moment of insight or clarity that one sometimes has. And both are very cool spiritual concepts. So this Epiphany, I thought we might look to the wise ones or the Magi themselves for some lessons on how we can live Epiphany into the new year. First, the Magi were tuned into the mystical or the spiritual. Scholars speculate that the wise ones were Zoroastrians. Zoroastrianism is an ancient monotheistic religion which had mystical elements to their practice and worship. And even though they are from far away, they are aware that something special has happened, and they are compelled to see for themselves. We're not particularly good at tuning into the mystical. It's not part of our tradition. And yet we all have the capacity to experience that mystical. Some call it a hunch, a feeling, a longing, a sense. Since I began practicing meditation, it has been amazing to me how many mystical nudges I've received that I would have never noticed if I hadn't been intentional about tuning in. But the mystical doesn't have to be some out there kind of practice. It can be as simple as listening to one's body, to one's heart and mind. After all, how are we going to have an epiphany of either variety if we aren't paying attention? The Magi paid attention. The scripture tells us that they came to Jerusalem because they had seen a new star and followed it. They go to Herod to find out if he knows what this means, since this is happening under his jurisdiction. They were tuned in enough to see a change in the sky as something significant. We have signs all around us, don't we? Some are little nudges and some are spiritual slap in the face. Tuning into the spiritual opens us to those signs that God sends to us. They help direct our lives. They help alter our course. They help assure us of our path. And if nothing else, they help us to tune in enough so that God doesn't have to do something drastic to get our attention. The Magi also understood real authority. They came to pay their respects to the child Jesus. And even though this was a child and not an earthly king, the Magi recognized that something special has happened. And they come bringing the gifts that they would bring to a king or a ruler. They don't give them to Herod. They keep them and give them to the child Jesus and his family. They are able to see beyond their expectations, the way it's usually done, to the way God meant it to be. Have we missed out on opportunities to witness something special because it didn't fit our expectations? We know that wisdom can be found in all kinds of places. And yet, how many times have we gone through life with the blinders of our expectations on to walk right by a spiritual moment, a God moment, because it wasn't where we expected it to be or where we were looking for it? I think of our vision team and the experience that they're going to have on this trip. I know that they will receive more than they will give because they're open to the ways in which the Spirit will work, not only through them, but through the community they go to serve with as well. And it's important to note that the Magi also saw beyond their own spiritual perspective. The Magi are not Jews. The prophecy of the Hebrew Scripture was not for them. And yet they come because they trust that something important has happened, something with implications beyond their own faith tradition and experience. We know that too. We too learn when we are open to the spirituality and traditions of others. God is not limited to our tradition or our way or any. And they also weren't afraid to stand up to corruption and for justice. They're warned in a dream not to return to Herod, and they don't. And that's a good thing, because they recognize that this ruler in whose country they travel is not the real authority here. Indeed, Herod seeks to kill Jesus. The Magi seek justice when they do not return to Herod as he had commanded them. And they may even have put their own lives at risk in doing this. Our faith, too, encourages us to seek justice, even when it stands at odds with the civil authorities of our day. And finally, their story represents God's manifestation to the whole world. Christian scripture celebrates this visit of men from another country and another faith, because God is not confined by religion. God with us means God with all of us. The Magi recognize this. We have an opportunity as we do each Epiphany and really every day of our lives, to live as Epiphany people. May we have the wisdom of the Magi to trust our spiritual insights and pay attention and to heed the signs that God puts before us. May we have the trust to journey where God leads us and the courage to seek God's justice. And may we too be living manifestations of God's love for all the world. Amen.